This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast features Stuart Madany of Seminary Hill Cidery. We had an intriguing conversation of Stuart's journey from architect to cider maker. We tasted two of Seminary Hill's fabulous expressions. Be sure to reach out to Stuart and Seminary Hill Cidery and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guests. He's Stuart Madany. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
Stuart, we get to talk Seminary Hill Cidery today. We're going to go and meander through a lot of things. I'm always excited when I get a chance to talk cider. How did Seminary Hill Cidery get started?
Well, so the owners, Doug Doetsch and Susan Manning, started it. Doug is, he lives in Evanston, and as does Susan. But Doug did part of his growing up here in Callicoon, New York, in the Western Catskills. And his family goes back 5 generations here. So he's long had it in mind that he wanted to do a project that really was a demonstration of the viability of an agricultural concern in Sullivan County in the 21st century. When he grew up, a lot of dairy farms were going out of business. It's it's very, very rocky and lots of hilly terrain up here. So dairy farming was mostly the kind of farming that existed. And then, it just, as transportation improved, it just became harder and harder to have a small dairy farm in the Catskills. And so I think he's long had it in mind, the idea of a cidery, and a value-added product. And kind of the first time we talked on the phone, he said he wanted to do a demonstration project that could work. So we have 2 orchards. They're about, a mile apart. And the first one that started to be planted in 2014, they started cover cropping to build the soil in 2012. And that's on family land, at least back to his grandfather, or maybe farther, I'm not sure. And then about 20 years ago, they bought the land that the other orchard and the cidery itself is on, which is a beautiful spot overlooking the Delaware. And you look from the tasting room down over the orchard to the Delaware Valley and the river below. And that they started planting in 2016 and doing like 300 trees a year for a few years. So, and then the building got finished. I started in October of 2020, October 1st, 2020. The building we could get in a little later, a couple months later, and finally start making cider.
So that's a lot there. And with the orchard right now, how many varietals are you specifically growing for your own production?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. Right now, there are 54 varieties of cider apple and 7 of Pear, which is an enormous number. Everyone has its own bloom time, its own ripening time, its own everything, its own pest susceptibilities and resistances, et cetera. And it makes a lot of different, batches to blend. But the idea is that through planting a lot of varieties and seeing which ones both do well here and make really nicely flavored cider here, we can narrow it down to, maybe somewhere between the upper teens and the lower 20s, probably, of varieties that really do well here and can kind of really reflect the terroir in that way of the spot, and top work over, which is basically cutting off the top of the tree and grafting a different variety onto it. We can essentially turn the more mediocre varieties into the excellent varieties eventually. But it's a long process. There's a lot about cider making that involves patience, and that's certainly part of it.
So right now, it's literally a working laboratory for you, and it could go season to season. You don't want to give up on a varietal just yet,
right?
Because it may take a little bit more time to mature, and then you don't want to rush into a varietal because maybe that just doesn't pan out the same way either, does it?
Right. No, that's true. There's certainly a degree to which the fruit changes as this trees mature, but right now the first step is we really have, and I'm knocking on wood here, we have a great bloom, and we could have a really wonderful crop this year with a lot of batches, enough to make a bunch of single varietal ferments and really learn more about which apples are really great and which ones are on the let's see list. So the quality of the fruit may continue to change as the trees mature for some time, but after a few years, we'll be able to pretty much know if ones are really just kind of okay or really wonderful, and start to move some trees over.
Your experience with cider, even talking to you briefly, this is very technical for you. This is it's a passion for you. How did you get started in cider making?
It kind of came as a surprise to me, really. I'm trained as an architect, and I was working in an architecture firm in Virginia, in Central Virginia. And we were working for a gentleman who, really a partnership that had bought a historic property, and they had a small cattle operation, but one of the owners said he wanted us to do a feasibility study for a vineyard or a winery. He just thought there was a better agricultural use for the land than beef cattle. And so the gentleman I was working for, he suggested we also, consider an orchard and cidery. And so he said, sure to that. And make a long story short, we moved in the cider direction. We planted the design. The design for the orchard and the production part fell on my desk. So I ended up just studying everything I could about cider making. This was 2009, so there weren't a lot of cideries around. In Virginia, there was Foggy Ridge, and Albemarle Cider Works was in planning. They had their Vintage Virginia Apples nursery business going, and they were working towards getting Albemarle Cider Works up and running. So there wasn't a huge amount of information available. There were people to talk to, and absolutely one of my favorite things about the cider industry is just the collegial atmosphere and how much everybody is just willing to share information and help each other. It's just great. But anyway, so I learned all I could about it, and then he said to us in a meeting, the owner, all right, well, let's go ahead and build it out. Just find me somebody to run it first. And the architect I was working for just literally took me aside and said, what do you say we run it? And I just said, what? I'd never done a home ferment or anything. I had worked in a restaurant with a Grand Spectator, a Wine Spectator Grand Award, and knew something about wine. But yeah, I just was like, well, let me think about that. And, but every major life decision for me has to rely mostly on intuition. And to my surprise, it felt right. And so in about 3 days, I said, yeah, let's do it. And it, for the next 6 months, I would just be like sort of pinching myself and saying, I'm doing what now? but but it's entirely fascinating to me. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And just you never get to the bottom of it. There's always so much to learn and so many things to try.
Talk about the process going back to that time of not a lot of resource, not a lot of cideries to really rely on. What were some of those? Where did you go find the information? What was it, and how did you learn about cider making? Look, it wasn't home cider making. You're talking capacity cider. You're talking, large capacity cider making. How did you really learn to understand and educate yourself about that?
Well, it was a mix of everything I could do. So I read, there were a few books. Andrew Lee's book, Craft Cider Making, was really impressed me, and I guess was the most sort of hands-on how-to kind of one, but wasn't necessarily enough. I read everything I could find online or in books. I talked to everybody I could find. We had a couple of winemakers who were consultants at first, who definitely helped me some. I remember asking one just like, well, I've been using CO2 to push like the rest of the cider through the hose. Is that right? It was like, yep. So I don't know. It's just, I'd never seen another cellar working. So yeah, I talked to everybody I could. I went to cider days up in Franklin County. I can't honestly remember what came first. I know that Amarillo Cider Works started to have people down to give talks, and those were very helpful. Met Steve Wood at those. I met Jocelyn Kozelka, who later became, or quickly after that, became a consultant for me. She's fantastic. She was at Foggy Ridge and has her own winery and cidery now. Wish I could remember the name and give it a little plug, but it's in Virginia. But yeah, just and then of course just learning by doing. I remember, of course, our orchard had just gone in, so it didn't have any fruit. And I remember calling. There was some listing on the internet of apple orchard in Virginia, and I remember calling everyone to see if they had any varieties that seemed, suitable for cider making. Oh, and I did take. Oh yeah, I took those Peter Mitchell classes. The University of Vermont was sponsoring those, and I had to wait till the last minute because if anybody from Vermont wanted to take it, they had to give the seats to them. But they ended up having a couple of extra seats, so I got to take those. That was really helpful. And I went out to Steve Wood's place. Somebody who was working for him. That's Farnham Hill. Somebody who was working for him was in the class, and she said, "Oh, it's growler night tonight. You guys should come out." So we went out there and met him, and I just remember him giving us a taste out of a barrel of some Ashmead's kernel cider, and just realizing that the potential for what you could do with cider was really, really great, really fascinating. So yeah, so just everywhere I could.
I'm curious, with all that, what was it like that moment where you were ready to bottle, or you were tasting that first cider, whatever that was you made, and this is at Castle Hill? What was that like for you, that experience? You're very good with reconnecting to the past in your mind, and I watch you do that and your face lights up. But what was that like that first time? Because you're an architect. You build, you make sure that the foundation's there and the walls and everything fits together so it doesn't fall down. making cider is building blocks. It's structure.
There's a lot of similarity in terms of sort of working within constraints and it taking a long time to sort of develop sort of an artistic intention. I remember, I had 3 blends initially that I worked and kind of put together 3 blends, and I was just feeling, kind of nervous about it. I got to say, it was just like, just didn't know what to think. I mean, I hadn't even had any ciders other than like woodchuck before I started to do this, and I remember, I know Almirall Cider Works was hosting one of these events they had, and I know that Steve Wood and Ben Watson were there, and so I think the morning after that they came out because we imported the first Brewery from the Republic of Georgia to the U.S. and had them out there, and so they came out to get a look at those, I think, and I asked Steve to taste my blends. So and he was he gave me one piece of advice, but I remember he seemed sort of surprised. I remember him being surprised that these were my first blends. So I took that as a positive note.
He did a little double take. He's wondering, how long you've been making cider, and thinking maybe it's been a longer period, right?
Yeah. So that was very encouraging. Yeah.
You take all that and you go through the experience of learning cider, building a cidery, creating the whole plan, and then you go and you're now at Seminary Hill Cidery. What do you really look to bring to the cidery? And, that's your legacy, because it sounds like the owners, their mindset is this is a legacy for them, for the community, for their family, but you also have a legacy too. So what are you, for Seminary Hill Cidery, what's your legacy, or what are you looking to imprint on that cidery?
Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure if I tend to look at it that way necessarily. I'm just trying to, in the present, I'm trying to make the best cider I can, but I definitely have a point of view. I definitely am interested in the terroir. I mean, just to also mention, I was actually thinking of going back to architecture, and I stumbled upon their ad, and I saw that they were growing organically. They were building the world's first Passive House certified cidery, or actually, it's the world's first Passive House certified alcoholic beverage facility. And that really spoke to me. My approach to architecture has always been about sustainability and healing. And so both those things just kind of grabbed my attention. So Passive House, if you're not familiar, is the second most well-known sustainable building certification. LEED, of course, is the most famous. And that takes a very sort of trying to take the whole system into account. And Passive House is much more like, if we make it simple, we'll get a lot more buy-in and have more positive effect. It's very, very tight envelope, lots of insulation, solar orientation is most of what it is. But I'm very interested in the terroir and to find the apples that really fit there and really produce wonderful cider. And then, sort of discovering the process to make products that really, reflect that and sort of maximize what those apples are offering. So that's a constant ongoing process, but I guess that's hopefully what I'm bringing here.
There must be some sort of, it must be refreshing for you too, to work with some apples and the same orchard and find that new environment where, maybe there's some new varietals, some things you've always wanted to use, and they grow differently in New York than they do in Virginia.
They
So
totally
that gives
do.
like it's a new palette for you to play with, or new paints as a medium.
Exactly. It's really true. There's a bunch of aromatic varieties like Egremont Russet and Ribston Pippin and Hudson's Golden Gem, et cetera, that I'm very intrigued with and really excited about. But I'm also really excited that the British bittersweets, the high tannin, low acid apples from Britain. There's a bunch of varieties of those that are often, one of the best sources of tannin, and they're just so much more aromatic up here. So they're really wonderful. So yeah, that's been a fascinating difference. I'm very excited about.
I know it always, the discussion is about the apples or the pears. What has it been for you as far as yeast selection, or maybe finding new yeast now to work with? Has that changed for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I could say that's 100% changed as a real. Well, it sort of has, because the apples. It's all about pairing the apples and the yeast together, right? To find the yeast that really bring out what's latent in the apple, and I think because there's more aromatics here, that has been that I found different yeasts that are working with those bittersweet apples that are really producing wonderful aromas. Yeah, but it's an ongoing process. Like, that was one thing at the beginning. I had, I think, 16 carboys going with 16 different yeast at the very beginning. And I don't think I'm using any of those yeast today, but but yeah, that's just an
Fleischmann's didn't make the cut, did it?
What?
Fleischmann's didn't make the cut, did
No,
it?
it didn't.
I know we have these two wonderful bottles that you sent up to share today on the podcast. How many expressions do you currently have that are regulars for the cidery?
Boy, I think I might have to. Oh, that are regulars? Well, I don't think we've even gotten into a groove of how many we could call regulars. I think, like right now, up in the tasting room, we've got 11 that we're pouring.
Okay.
And I think there's probably a couple, maybe two more that will rotate in, and then we probably have 4 or 5 small batches that are just for the cider club. Either small lots of estate fruit that we often do, like a wild ferment with those, and just offer it to the cider club. There was a experiment we did this last year that I'm really excited about, that is a tiny batch that we is just for the cider club this year. It's actually the boxes are waiting for UPS to come pick them up right now. And that was it's just a Hughes crab and golden russet blend, but we did carbonic maceration with the Hughes crab, and that was extremely interesting to me. I'm super excited about it. Yeah.
For Dawn and I, and as we discover more about cider and in our fermented adventure, yes, there are those standard releases, but then you get involved in the mad science of these cider clubs, and it's exciting and at the same time really disappointing. Exciting because of all the wonderful things that are being done and created and tried and enjoyed, and disappointing because sometimes these things are hard to get a hold of,
Well, true.
There's a limited release, and once it's going, or as you are doing, hey, these are allocated for a cider club. These are our raving fans. They're paying to be part of the select few. But when you hear of these wild ferments and these limited barrel aging processes and secondary finishes and all the things that people may be doing, it's fascinating to me, because I think is for you, Stuart, this is your craft. You're a craftsman. It's your way to play. It's your way you get an idea in your head and you're like, let me see if this will work. We got these apples. Let's try it. It's not a big release. Let's see what we can do. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's, you don't want to take a wild swing at a giant batch. But this one is definitely going to turn into sort of another set of experiments on a bigger scale in the fall. And I'm super happy with it. I'm gonna vary the timing on it and see how that changes things and stuff. So I will break the batch into different parts and vary the timing on it this coming year. But it's going to turn into something more widely available.
All right, we have your cackling hen, and we have your Delaware dry. So which one should we try first?
Let's go with the dry first, the Delaware dry.
Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure, the podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast. All right. And I love, who does your labels? Who creates your labels? They are so cool.
So it's a husband and wife, and their company is called Homestead, and they're right in the area here. They're in sort of the next town over called Livingston Manor, and yeah, they do some great stuff.
One of my favorite things, and for regular listeners to the podcast, I love the sounds. Bottles opening, pouring, the bubbles. This wonderful dance of the bubbles that are now being released for the first time. This was bottled back in 2021, as it says on the label. Mm-hmm. And so for 2 years, this has been just in the bottle.
Yep.
And now it gets to come out, and we get to try this.
Indeed.
Talk about your vision for this. What are we drinking? What are the apple varietals? Talk about this.
It is Chisel Jersey. And then, so that's one of those British bittersweets with a significant amount of tannin, and that's the biggest one in here. That's 42%, and then we've got really American heirlooms making up the rest of it. So Baldwin, Golden Russet, and Northern Spy. Two very New York apples in there, and Golden Russet.
The nose is a very juicy apple, but I get a lot of earthiness in the nose. I get a lot of apple skin in the nose. And there's a slight sense of that breadiness, some yeastiness to the nose. And as an introduction, this is the first thing I've had to drink all day. Well, most days I don't drink, so it's okay. Don't get any ideas. But the nose, there's also, I get a little bit herbaceousness, but more towards like a thyme or a mint on the nose. Okay. You're the creator. Talk about some of the things that stand out for you.
Well, I definitely get a spiciness in there too, and just orange. I
was just going to say citrus. Yeah. There's a citrus, but it almost is like an oily citrus versus.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I guess the best way if I squeezed, if I did something that orange and juice came out. It's not the juiciness; it's almost the oils that come out,
like orange zest.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So one of the things I love doing is just feeling the experience of this opening up and the different things you'll nose even before tasting. Again, as the air gets to this, and this has been out in the wild, so to speak, now for the first time in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. How this may change. And I know we don't have all day just to sit here and smell, so let's try.
Fair enough.
There is so much tannin, dryness, and apple, but it's that juicy on the nose went to more of a drier, almost like a leathery, dry feeling in the mouth. Yeah, indeed. But it's very, to me, this is, how do I want to put this? It's a fresh, unique, wonderful experience of flavor. This is dry, so you're not getting any residual sugar. Right. And to me, this is a wonderful cider to just sip and experience. This is almost like, I would say this is almost like a cigar pairing cider that you're just going to get to play with, because it's not going to really impede on those tobacco notes, but the same way the tobacco is not going to impede on the wonderful cider flavor here.
Yeah, I'm not a cigar smoker, so I can't really speak to
All
that.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think what you talked about, that dryness, I mean, it's quite astringent and a little bitter at first. Like not, I know, I think I sometimes people feel put off when they hear bitter, but I mean, it's like it's not as bitter as coffee. Certainly, there's a little bitterness there, but then after that, then that really sort of juicy orange kind of kicks in. I one thing I like about this cider is how much it changes across the palate.
That first experience, you hit it. The astringency, the bitterness, but that was actually welcome to me.
Mm-hmm.
And now what's happening is my palate becomes acclimated to this. You hit it. There's that citrus. It's orange. Me, I even get a little lemon to it. There's some brightness to it. There's a little acidity, but not a lot that comes out. Wonderful sipping cider. Again, we have had conversations. We talked about Eleanor Leger of Eden Cider, and we talk about CiderCon.
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience at CiderCon?
This last time was the first time I'd been in 5 years, so it was great to be back there. I love CiderCon. It's one thing is just being in a space with so many people who share your area of fascination. It's just fun. And like I said, the cider community is just so supportive. So it's just great to be with those people. And then there's always, just fascinating sessions to go to and a chance to taste a lot of other cider. There's no other time in my life where I get to taste that much cider, So yeah, and really unusual things. I went to a Perry session where I got to taste a bunch of, Tom Oliver Perry, which is always a wonderful experience, and I think 3 other wonderful Perrys. So yeah, I love CiderCon. Earlier CiderCons, I remember the first one I went to, I just felt like my head was going to explode because I'd taken in so much information, and
it's like drinking from a fire hose, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, after you've been to a few, it's not as shocking, but my first one, I had been trying to find all the information I could, and then suddenly there was just so much, and it was great, but it was like, wow, okay, how do I incorporate this? But yeah, I love CiderCon. It's just so much fun.
This cider is taking on champagne qualities as it sips. Small little tiny effervescence that just kind of lingers even after you swallow. There's this effervescence, is very champagne-like in its presentation. Obviously we can't call it champagne because it's not from the region of France, but do you think with the identity of New York being a wine producing state, wine region of the United States, do you think there's some, your customer, your visitor, do you think there's some expectation of when you're out and about, are you looking for that wine drinker this is going to appeal to that? Because you also come from Virginia, from that experience, which is very much a wine-centered region.
Yep.
Is that something you find, the mindset or just the presentation of maybe either is expected or perceived?
Well, it's hard to know for sure. I mean, I think both Virginia and New York have a good cider culture, and have a lot of good cider. That was another thing that appealed to me about coming up here, was I thought it was on the East Coast. New York and Virginia are my favorite 2 states for cider. West Coast, I'm not even sure about because I haven't spent. They both. New York, I think, has a really strong, harvest-driven or orchard-driven, whatever you want to call it, this kind of cider. There's a lot of appreciation for it, and there's a lot of this kind of cider up here, as well as being obviously a lot of wine culture here. And I think that's probably not total coincidence. I think, that there's definitely some cross-pollination both in the making and the appreciating of it. So yeah, I think that's true.
I didn't think about it at the time until I started to get, like I said, that champagne perspective on the cider. And I said, wow, all right, you're in New York. Now, maybe the Catskills were not part of the Finger Lake region.
Right.
It's still, this mindset of, hey, this is also part of our community. And I'm asking you because, where you are at the Callicoon, New York area, right? Did I say that right?
That's
okay, good. When people are coming up to the Catskills, are they looking for cider? Are they looking for wine? And how are you feeling that? Look, Stuart, you've been doing this for a while. You are part of what I would consider, why not cider? Why aren't you considering cider an alternative? Where do you, or what is it you're working on and focusing on to help either the sommeliers, or who's behind the bar, or the servers, or the stores in the area, or even the consumer, to stop and say, you know what, I see all the wines that are on that selection, and maybe I'm interested in a beer tonight, but wow, why don't you have just one cider, or why is it only one cider? Why don't you have more ciders? How are you working to change that perception, or that consumer palate idea, what they're gravitating to, what they want?
Right. I think, the biggest thing is always the one-on-one experience and the getting it in someone's mouth. That's the most certain way to convince somebody. It's a little theoretical till then. So what we do, we do tours every week here and with a guided tasting. But we've lately been going to the city, and we're self-distributed, and so we've been going to the city and just trying to get it out there and get people to taste it. Get beverage directors to taste it, and head bartenders and owners and whoever does the purchasing, just to taste it and understand what we're doing and what's out there. New York, I think New York has more cideries than any other state, and a lot of them are the kind of cider that we are, where we're growing and using true cider varieties and making more complex or layered product, very analogous to wine. And but still, in the city, it's still not like everybody knows about it. It's not like everybody knows about the breadth of the category of cider. A lot of people still will have that impression of like, I still hear people say, I don't like cider, it's too sweet for me. And so the one we're drinking right now is 0.0 grams per liter of sugar, so it's not too sweet for anybody. But that perception persists, and there's just a lot of education still needed. So we're just chipping away at it. Again, obviously talking with you is a form of that, right?
One would hope. No, we're big proponents of cider, and
yeah, I know.
And for us, I think that I see it for Dawn and I and Fermented Adventure. We do see this as, hey, look, you don't have to love it, but try it. See what your experience is, but don't just write it off because, as you said, I have this, it's like we talk about all the time of, people that don't like gin. Why don't you like gin? Because I had that bad gin experience in college. Well, for a lot of people, sadly, their first try of cider was, or hey, look, I can pound down 4 of these and I'll get a really nice buzz and we'll call it a night. And that's not what cider really is. It is and can be. There's so many different categories of what you can do. This, to me, I'm thinking, we're Memorial Day's coming. We got ribs that I'm smoking and sausage and chicken and whatnot. And this would pair well. This dry cider would pair so well with that. But also, you can make, think about this. You can make a cocktail out of this. This could be a mimosa, or even I would experience with some fruit flavors like raspberries, like a Pear, or just some different things in play. So that bartender in New York City or throughout the world, grab a cider, create a cocktail, because if people are not creating cocktails out of cider, then you're on the forefront. You're on the cutting edge.
Right.
And people are going to gravitate towards your bar or your bar program because you're making something different. And this, this dry cider is an amazing, perfect vehicle for creating that cocktail, or a sipper or food pairing. And, again, yes, we want people to try cider and find different ways, because I think when they do, they'll start and say, okay, I need to find more about this. I want to learn more about this.
Yeah. I think what you say about food is so true. I mean, cider really, is so happy with food. And I think if you've, maybe only tried a very narrow aspect of cider, you probably weren't pairing it with food, and that may just not be sort of on your radar at all. But yeah, cider, there's a lot of food that's wonderful with cider. Pork and cheese are the classics, but shellfish and cider is kind of across the board an amazing pairing. And obviously, grilled food is great. Asian food is often wonderful with cider. There's a lot of, probably not a big steak. Probably really want to go with red wine for that. But there's a lot.
You want something bold with that. But but here's the thing: what you want to make sure that the wine doesn't lose its character against the food. And I think the cider can be considered the same way. Yeah. I don't know if I go down the steak road or the beef road, but with the cider, it will stand up. At least the dry one, it will stand up to something that's spicy. It will stand up, I think, to something that has a lot of different, like an Indian expression of food. I think that would go very well with that.
Absolutely.
Play with that, invite friends over, grab some of your Seminary Hill Cidery. I'm sure you ship throughout the country, right?
We do. I think it's 41 states. It's if you go on the website and go to Cider and Cider Shop, there's a list of all the states right there.
All right. So here's the thing: plan a meal, invite some friends, buy some bottles, ship to your house, open it, and have a party.
Indeed.
And then join the club, so you get those special releases sent to your place too. But here's the thing: you've got this gorgeous, like you talk about, this beautiful building that overlooks the Delaware, and if you want, people can come and get married there, right? It's wedding season.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a gorgeous view. We've got a big tent with a tent pad and just a phenomenal backdrop for your wedding. Great place. We also, we're lucky in that we have a full menu in the tasting room, and we have a really talented young chef who he likes to make his own cider, and is really makes some things that pair wonderfully with cider. Really, it's a really nice menu. And that menu's on the website, of course, as well.
I went ahead and I opened up the Cackling Hen.
Very good.
And you get, all right, so this is a semi-sweet. And you do get more of that sugar on the nose. But the first thing I also got, Stuart, was almost like a peach quality, nectarines on that. Mm-hmm. That was so wonderfully refreshing, almost like the apple blossom versus that apple on that nose.
Yeah. That makes sense.
You still get brightness. There's a little bit more, to me, there's a little bit more acidity or that presents there. It doesn't feel like, I don't know. I haven't tasted this. I'm just wondering, the bubbles seem bigger, not so petite on this one than the other one.
Yeah, maybe when you first pour it, I think they might be. I think it's a little lighter carbonation on this. I have to retaste it, remind myself.
This is fun for you too, isn't it? It's like, wow, I haven't had this in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on some other things. Now I get to revisit one of my other children.
Indeed, exactly. Yeah.
This has a more, I'm going to say, viscous mouthfeel.
Yeah, indeed.
What I'm really enjoying, and this is the beauty of cider. The beauty of cider is all these different apple varietals that come to play in this bottle. And the blend, this is such a wonderful complemented blend, but I almost feel like there's little nuances that kind of punch out here and there.
Yeah.
That is, so talk about the varietals in this.
So this one is, it's Dabinet is about a third of it. That's another, so actually a lot of these are these British bitter sweets, these low acid, high tannin apples, Dabinet, Ellis Bitter, Harry Masters Jersey, and Tremlett's Bitter. And then it has Golden Russet, Chisel Jersey, another of those, and then Newtown Pippin and Ribston Pippin. So quite a wide blend. I'm a big believer in blending, I guess would be a way to put it. I really think that the quality of the apples is paramount, and then you do all you can with fermentation, but then I do hundreds and hundreds of blending trials every year, and I really think you can really just maximize it. It's little subtle changes in proportion really change how it comes across, and so I find the blending process really, really fascinating and rewarding. So yeah, this one really has quite a bit going on in it. I think it's got has a lot of astringency again. The tannin gives it body. With all the tannic fruit in there, it still is. It doesn't really have the bitterness that the other one did. It's got astringency and body from the tannin, but it's kind of soft. It also has sort of a sort of creamy vanilla. It wasn't in barrel, but it has sort of a vanilla aspect, and even sort of a cocoa butter kind of element to it.
What is standing out to me is this grape jelly quality to it.
Yeah, Concord grape, I'd say.
But it's like I just feel like the only thing I'm missing on this right now, that profile that keeps hitting me, is just spreading out a piece of bread with some peanut butter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm being transformed to my childhood. And I get so much of that's lingering on the palate. And then, as you pointed out, you get the astringency, you get the tannic nature to it that really holds that flavor profile to the finish. And I would see this again. This is such a wonderful cider for food pairing, for just sipping. This is, hey, light the fire, just grab a couple glasses, sit on the porch, and just watch the fireflies this summer. I don't know. That's a wonderful experience about this cider. Because I think, again, being a proponent for cider, you almost have to say it's not just food sometimes. It's you could take legally, if you're allowed to drink on a beach, you could take cider to a beach. You could take cider to the lake. You don't want to take cider and ride your motorbikes, around the track. But there are different ways to enjoy this. There are different places that people may not think about other than, hey, cracking open a bottle and, cans, of cider. There are plenty of places to enjoy that.
Yep.
Talk more about the facility and, the tasting room. What can people experience when they come out to Seminary Hill Cidery, and what they're going to find when they get there?
Yeah, well, I will say that if you're coming between May and October, you should check the website, because there's often a wedding, especially on a Saturday. And when there is a wedding, the tasting room closes. So just do a quick check of the website before you head out. But other than that, we're open Wednesday through Sunday, longer hours on Friday and Saturday. And sometimes there's music here. There's always the full menu. It's very local, very farm to table. And on Wednesday and Thursday, it's actually a barbecue and fried chicken menu. And then it's a little more seasonally variable, and I don't know. It's a more full menu on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The menu's always online. Like right now, we have duck breast with pickled huckleberry.
See, now you're just going to make me hungry. And,
Sorry. And it's a gorgeous view here. And we do, full tastings are always available. And of course, cider by the glass or bottle. Again, we're pouring, I think, 11 varieties right now. Not varieties, but 11 different blends, let's say, or 11 expressions. Yeah. On Sundays, we at 11 in the morning, we do a tour, which is a pretty in-depth tour, I gotta say. We take you out in the orchard and talk about orcharding and apples and organic orcharding and, sort of what apples mean to cider. And then we take you into the cellar and give you a sense of the process. And then we go upstairs and we do a tasting of 8 ciders. We don't do 11 because 8 seems like enough in one sitting. And then of course, if you're thinking of getting married, you should definitely check the place out.
Now you also have lodging there too, so you can really make this a wonderful weekend, a getaway. Use this as your home base and explore the New York area from just where you are, from Seminary Hill Cidery, and then just keep traveling out, make it a day trip, and come back and open up a bottle and just enjoy the delicious food too.
You really can. The micro hotel is it's not on site at the cidery, but it's just like less than a mile down the road. So real close by. It's a historic property that's been renovated. Actually, Homestead, who did our labels, they did the design of the renovation there too.
Now, when I think the Catskills, I'm sorry, I just think of comedians and such. Is there an open mic night? Will we find a comedian or two at Seminary Hill?
Actually, it's funny you should say that, because we've got our first comedian event coming up. I can't remember exactly when it is right now, but if you go to the website, there's a menu heading of upcoming events, and I think it's in 2 or 3 weeks. It's not a regular thing yet. It's not Borscht Belt days here now, but we do have one anyway coming up.
So we will not find you on an episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, huh?
I don't believe so.
Well, that's a shame, because they really should have been there and really checked you guys out, because I think they would have had a great time.
Indeed.
Stuart, is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast? Anything you want our listeners to know or share about you or Seminary Hill Cidery?
No, just we'd love to see you out here, or if you get a chance, just try our cider at we're really just distributed in sort of our local area in the city, and then of course, but we're available to ship just about everywhere. So no, just hope you all give us a try, and and thanks, Rich, for talking with me.
You're welcome, but I want to interject real fast, because I took another sip of that cider. And again, this is why you linger on cider.
Yeah.
You enjoy it, because what came out of the end and the finish now is more of like an ice wine or an ice cider finish. It's got that sweetness, but there's that juiciness. I call it juiciness of the apple, because you get so much of what you would expect if you were drinking. It's got to be apples. You can't lose the fact that if you're drinking a cider, you don't want to say, oh, I feel like I'm drinking a tomato. No, it's a cider, and you should have apple quality, right?
Right, for sure.
I'm always perplexed at people that I'll watch people and they'll share their experience of drinking wine, and it's their experience, and I respect that, but they'll say everything about that wine other than grape.
Right. I mean, partly it's because it's like, well, it's always there, I mean, there's always the apple character, so I don't always mention it,
But it's fair to say, because we are drinking an apple product, different varietals of apples, and you want to know so many of those things, like you talked about, the aromatics, the tannins, the bitterness, the sweetness, all that's there that really come out and make apples even more of a fun, interesting, complex medium, in some cases more so than I think grapes. And that's just my experience. I would be remiss if we talked a little bit about a barrel program. Are there some secondary finishes that you're doing? Are there some barrels stored away that we can get excited about in the future for release?
Just a little bit. Right now, we've just released an apple port called Hen's Teeth. So I should say Callicoon is our town name is Old Dutch for wild turkey. So we have a few product names that somehow reference turkey. So the cackling hen and the hen's teeth are both related to that. So hen's teeth is a 100% Dabinet port that we recently released, and that was barrel aged in a half in a former port barrel and half on medium well toasted French oak. We're looking to barrel age some cider this year. I haven't completely decided what we're going to do that with yet. So we have kind of a small nascent barrel program, which we're intending to build up with time here.
Well, you mentioned wild turkey. So I think at some point, cider should meet wild turkey bourbon and find a nice way, because this would be a wonderful complement to that used wild turkey barrel. And that would be just a wonderful continuance of the story. Wild turkey meets wild turkey.
I hadn't thought of that. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Stuart, this has been a treat. I am so glad we met you at CiderCon, and this is just the ability to continue the conversation is great. I heard you say port. We're firing up the car. We're heading up now.
Right on.
We'll see you in more. I don't know how long it takes to do this. This has been great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. And we look forward to all the great things for Seminary Hill Cidery.
Rich, thanks so much. We really appreciate your support of cider. And it's just been a pleasure chatting with you. So thanks so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.